right, let's get into the Raiders. 2021 came into the season with a win expectation of 8. They sailed past it, but perhaps unjustifiably so. They went 10-7, so went 2 games over. Pythag had them at 6.9. Our Pythag 2.0 had them slightly better, but in that 7-win range. Went 8-9 ATS, but nonetheless did win a $100 unit better, $876 betting the spread and money line over the course of the season. And certainly that's not coming from the spread side, going 8-9, more so coming from money line wins, kind of winning some key games, some big upsets. Certainly one of them was there right off the bat in week 1 versus the Ravens on Monday Night Football. Came back, and then even coming off that Ravens win, everyone really dismissed the Raiders. We're almost a touchdown underdog on the road versus Pittsburgh. And then I think this is, and we can see here, as I don't even need to think, but after this win was really when the market then started to buy in to the Raiders. And we can see that was essentially where they peaked. They tested it once more kind of mid-season. But even as they kind of got a little bit stronger into the end of the season, at least from winning perspective, winning 4 in a row to end the season and getting into the playoffs. In fact, they were at their lowest point from the ELO model, again, power ranking perspective. Again, so quite volatile, but even though they got, again, ostensibly better in the second half of the season, this would say, in fact, they were a worse team in the second half of the season.
I love this chart for 2 reasons. Number one, each of the first 3 weeks with the Raiders, their first 3 opponents, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Dolphins, right? The Ravens being power ranked 6th, the Steelers being power ranked 9th, Dolphins 17th, retrospectively look absurd because we know the Ravens didn't turn out to be the 6th best team, the Steelers not the 9th, etc. Which I think makes a broader point of kind of the dangers of projecting too much about schedule, especially early on in the season. We don't really know who's going to be that great. The second thing is just the Raiders didn't really have the quality wins we thought they did. The first 3 wins were like Ravens and Steelers didn't turn out to be much, and they got absolutely trounced by their opponents. They get lost to the Chiefs 41-14, 48-9, and some awful losses to the football team, to the Giants, to the Bears. Models, at least, were convinced this team was nothing going into the playoffs.
Keep in mind for that Ravens-Steelers game, too, the Ravens came into that game banged up in the secondary to start with. The Ravens were up, I want to say, about 10 to 14 points mid to early fourth quarter from what I remember, and then they won in overtime. Steelers game, that was a nice win, but when you dive deeper, TJ Watt got hurt mid-game, and there was another defensive lineman who got hurt mid-game too, and the Steelers had no pass rush at all. So I know it looks good on paper. Looking back, we know the Steelers weren't very good, but even in the game, I thought they were still somewhat lucky to lose 2 top pass rushers on the Steelers defense. And then when you look at the box score or the final score, Raiders pretty much either got blown out or came very close to losing the games, but they won a lot of those close games. So they went 10-7. I just think they were so overrated last year because they didn't beat anybody good or they got completely blown out for the most part.
And that's our Pythag 2.0, again, having it at around 7 wins definitely quantifies that observation. And you make a really good point too in that week 1 is the Raiders, in fact, were a very popular contest pick. So they're the top 3 pick. So going into that week 1, yeah, there were a lot of question marks around that Ravens team. And that's one of the reasons why they got a bump after beating the Ravens, but it wasn't too meaningful. But then kind of like after they crushed the Steelers, which the market was still high on the
Steelers had just beaten the Bills also.
Yeah. And everyone loved the Steelers because you see the Raiders were the 28th pick in week 2. It seemed like the buy on the Raiders week 1, what really wasn't a buy on the Raiders. It was more of a sell of the Ravens. And then they wanted to come right back and sell the Raiders. And I think this is the main reason why, when you're trying to talk about market perception and why you can get some really stark overreactions, is because what this demonstrates is the market did not believe in the Raiders in week 2. And then they were proven wrong. So now they're butthurt. And now they're saying, oh, we need to adjust. Maybe we didn't give them enough credit for that Ravens win. Now they just crushed the Steelers on the road as a touchdown underdog. This team's way mispriced. we need to adjust fast. And that's why I think the next week, top 3 pick again. I love the Raiders now. And then they squeak one out. I think this was like Thursday Night Football, maybe, versus the Dolphins.
Jacoby Brissett.
And don't cover as 3.5. And this is where the crack started to form. So the market gets super hot on a team, then they can't cover the 3.5 versus a subpar team. Then struggle versus the Chargers. And this was the really big kind of yellow flag, is when they were at home versus Justin Fields, and they just were not really that competitive in that game. Win probability around 33%, TWAM, the total weighted average margin, -6. They were justifiably beat. The other big red flag from the Raiders is look at these max deficits. They were losing sizably in almost every single game. So they were losing in 15 games this season. Their average deficit when losing was 10 points. Their average time-weighted average margin for a 10-7 team was negative at -1.5 points, which is just another attribute to suggest that on average, this team is losing. They're losing the game on average, yet they were 10-7. So just another statistic to go out and say, people could say, yeah, the Raiders were overrated last year. This is a statistic that actually demonstrates that is the case.
Even some of their wins, Jacoby Brissett, Nick Mullins they got against the Browns late in the season, Drew Lock, not Teddy Bridgewater, Carson Wentz when he was falling apart. In their wins, they just beat bad quarterbacks or had these lucky early season wins.
And then you had that super bizarre finale versus the Chargers. So offseason changes. I guess we can disagree on if the Raiders actually got better over the offseason. Of course, signed Devontae Adams. Everyone knows that. Also got Chandler Jones. But yeah, there's still a lot of holes on this team.
Also, just the continuity. I think that's the most players we've seen move on in one season.
So basically, a half new offense, half new defense, and basically a whole new coaching staff as well.
Yep.
How long do you think this team takes to gel with all this new stuff? At some point, it's going to have to show up in the win-loss column. Early on, if you look at the schedule, you got Chargers week 1. Week 2, I believe it is the Cardinals, Titans, Broncos, Chiefs. 3 of those 5 teams are not teams I'm going to be playing early on with new guys and new coaching staffs. So at what point do these coaching staff actually start to hurt them because the players just don't know the system yet?
Yeah, that's a nasty first 5 weeks. We can see strength of schedule from a futures kind of implied perspective. Third hardest, net rest -6 days, mean spread around flat, kind of suggestive of an 8.5 win total expectation. To win the division +650, certainly at the bottom. To make the playoffs +150. To win the Super Bowl +4,000. But I can see this team starting off 0-5, no problem. And yeah, is this a type of team that has a lot of turnover? It's a new coaching staff. Are they going to really be in position to really recover from that type of adversity? That's a big question. The good point is when you mentioned, Dan, that they have an early bye. Probably after those first 5 games, you're probably going to need a bye. Come out of that bye with a relatively easier schedule than certainly that they started the season with. So come out of the bye versus the Texans, play on the road versus the Saints, which that is a very generous spread at this point in time. And then the Jags, Colts, Broncos, Seahawks. So you got the next 5 games there, though, where you have 3 relatively easier games where you could start to pick up some wins. But then you close again, almost versus a schedule that's maybe even tougher than what you started with. So closing Chargers, Rams, Patriots, Niners, Chiefs. and you throw in a Steelers there on the road in Pittsburgh during the cold, which can still always be tough traveling across country, being a California team or a desert team.
If you look at that Niners game, if I'm playing the Niners this year, I want them early. A lot of people have mixed reviews on Trey Lance. Is he good? Is he not good? But regardless if he's good or not good end of the year, I'd much rather play him early, later in the year.
Yeah.
I think in either case, it's downside. Just it's either you have a more experienced Trey Lance or you have a Jimmy G. And you can say the same thing about the Jags as too. Playing the Jags in week 9, I would much rather play the Jags early on when they're still trying to figure things out. Trevor Lawrence has fewer games under his belt as well. Some of these bad teams that have a lot of roster turnover, have a new quarterback, things like that, you want to play them earlier.
Same thing with the Patriots.
Same thing with Patriots, yeah. Yeah, and our PyTag 2.0 model also likes the under. This is only its like 5th bet. Yeah, 5 for 5.
5 for 5, I think.
Yeah, and hopefully it goes 5 for 5.
That's right.
We'll see.
I certainly hope so.
What's the bullish case for the Raiders? I can't get the 9 wins on this one. I'm going to be generous and give them 7-10 in this schedule, but I am having trouble finding 9 wins. In the division, you're clearly the 4th best team, and you were lucky last year. So I can't even make an argument for the bull side of this team either.
Dan, I'm actually glad you asked, because I have all these talking points now about how bearish I am on the Raiders. But here's, I think, the bullish case. That Devontae Adams unlocks a Derek Carr that we haven't actually seen. Like Amari Cooper did, I'm forgetting if it's 2017 or 2016, when Carr had his 2nd best year. And Patrick Graham is a defensive wizard who turned the Giants, who had no talent last year, into a mediocre defense. And that's all they need. And chips fall right as they did last year. Everyone stays healthy, and you've got Carr throwing to Waller, Adams, Renfro. The offensive line doesn't really matter because these guys are getting open so quickly. And the Raiders win 10-11 games.
I think the upside is the offensive line is much better than we're pricing it currently. So right now it's 29th. And if they can play like a 15th ranked offensive line, I think that is going to be meaningful towards having them win more games than expected.
If I had to give this team a win number, I'd say 7 to 8 if they're really lucky and they do pan out. At some point, all those close wins last year just have to catch up. If we're just constantly saying you're going to stay healthy, that is something I can't bet on.
I don't actually even see 8.
I'm being generous with the 8 on this one. I think it's 7 and 10, probably closer to 6.
Yeah. I think there's already some very generous lines priced currently. At this point in time, being a pick'em on the road at New Orleans seems dumb. On the road at Seattle, being a favorite, and I understand Seattle's going to be good, but still, that's pretty aggressive to be a 2-point or 3-point favorite on the road. A very short favorite on the road again at Pittsburgh. I think none of those lines will be what they're expected to be here early in the season. So I think that in itself is saying that the market is still pretty high on the Raiders